Welcome on back, everyone. So, I originally had a video here where I made improvements to the mob blender because it can't get player kill drops. But then I made an improvement over that. So I'm just gonna quickly surmise what I've done up to that point. So first off, you need to get a mage's spell book, the tier 2 one, which you just need to get some blaze rods and some quartz blocks for. And I'll explain all this other stuff later. But you want the rank 2 one because then you can make tier 2 glyphs such as Flare, which has a very important ability where it will damage enemies that are on fire and then sets other nearby enemies on fire. And the purpose of this is that while, you know, using the sawmills to kill enemies doesn't count as a player kill, damaging them with spells does count as a player kill. So that's what we're going to be doing here. I've replaced the saws with stone and then slapped some redstone along the edges and through the center. And then what I'm going to need to do is get these comparators and use them to upgrade the spawners. So these are very useful because now the spawners won't be active unless you have a redstone signal touching them or connecting to them. And you'll still need to make the room dark and whatnot, but now instead of having to summon up a mage light, I can just activate them using a lever. And then, just like to know, I had some magma cube spawners. Those were very useful in making some blaze rods. Again, I'll explain that a little bit later, but for now, we can see that the redstone controller is working. So next up, I have a timer spell turret set up. And by right-clicking on it, you can change how many seconds between shooting, between the time it fires. So as we can see here, enemy gets hit, it sets all nearby enemies on fire. Now, while as cool as it is to set up a room where all the enemies get burnt to death by a spell, as we can see here, so we do get the experience too, but the major downside, the fire burns the loot. So I'll need to rework something here. First off though, I'm going to set up a Vitalic source link nearby, so any enemies that gets killed will generate source. So this system now becomes not just self-sufficient, but it becomes source positive. Next up, I changed the spell out for this more complicated one. Cold Snap, the exact same thing as Flare. The first spell will freeze an enemy, then cold flare it. Then there's a delay, so then it cold flares a second time, which then damages all the enemies that got slowed down by the first cold snap. Was I saying cold flare? Cold snap. And then I set up a tank here, and then an importer to import fluids. Now we have the experience going to the refined storage system. And you have to build refined storage cassettes for that. Then I made a great improvement to this. One of the issues was making sure an enemy would actually be in the center to get hit. The armor stand works perfect for this because it's considered an entity. So now the turret hits the armor stand, which then freezes all the nearby enemies and then cold snaps them all. And another reason to use a cold snap, obviously over a flare, is that obviously magma slimes can't be damaged by fire, nor can blazes. But also sometimes enemies will spawn from spawners that will just have fire resistance affected to them, so that takes care of that. So now, here's the improvement over this system. I ran some power on over, we got a motor generating some rotational force, I got a clutch hooked up to a link, and then past that clutch is a gear shift. I'm going to show how that all works off here in a second. But this will allow me to set up this system here. Hit this switch and just give it a few seconds. Now I have a piston that's shoving parts of stone into the room. And using this timer here, I can set up how many seconds it takes between setting out a pulse, which then triggers a pulse on a power toggle latch. And the way that thing works is whenever it receives a redstone signal, it turns on or off while pointing out its own redstone signal. So this works on the gear shift to make it go, forward and backward. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and carve out a little hole here on the other side of the room. And then going to make an outer perimeter of source blocks. Now, once you make an outer perimeter, almost like how you would make a nether portal. Well, first, let's talk about this. Runic chalk lets you set down a permanent rune on the ground, which you can then use a spell parchment on to make it cast a spell when someone steps on it. Just testing it out, works out perfectly fine. So now the idea is that the pusher will push the enemies in this direction, and they'll hit that rune, which will then cause damage to all the nearby enemies. This way they all get tagged as being damaged by a player. And then we're just going to want to extend the piston here even more. And this way I'll know like how many seconds to set the timer to make sure that the piston goes all the way through. Looks like I'll need to extend the system just a little bit more. And then of course I need to fill in the space to make sure no enemies spawn in over there. And I think about 13 seconds is good enough for this system. And the reason why I have just a straight line instead of moving the whole wall or even too high is that I don't want enemies to be able to go behind the system. It also keeps them from being crushed to death when they get pulled back. So there we go. It'll now push things over on top of the source blocks there. So once you do that, you can get a warp scroll. If you shift and right click, the warp scroll will record the location you were at. And if you then throw that, it makes a portal. So let's go ahead and give this new system a try. Of course, what I have planned, the slimes will not actually work for it, annoyingly enough. So, little mistake on my part. Let's retry this. Also, the soul lantern here will let you upgrade a spawner to ignore lighting conditions, so very useful if you want to light up the room. Also, the ambient lighting might be too much, though. That's another reason why I used it. But yep, there we go. And where do the enemies come down? Right on up here. So another inherent flaw to the spell turret system was that witches especially, the witches will just out-heal the spell turret. As soon as they get damaged, they'll immediately start chugging down potions. So with this system, they fall to their death. There's no worry about them healing themselves. But there's also another bonus to this. When falling on impact, they leave bloodstains behind. So this will be a way for me to also generate blood passively for Evilcraft when I finally start doing things involving that. But now the next issue to this is that enemies might trigger the rune prematurely. So I've now set this up to block the rune off when, there's no one being pushed. So this way, if I don't want to farm witches, then I'll just not use the pusher and I'll just engage the spell turret. Or if I want to like kill anything that can fly or is immune to fall damage, I can just turn off the pusher and use the spell turret. Now over here I have a redstone contact, which connects to another link, which then connects to another toggle power latch to do pretty much the exact same thing as I do with the pusher. But this time it raises and lowers the wall. So now I don't have to worry about enemies prematurely triggering the rune. Yep. System works perfect. It's great. A little bit later I do rejigger some timing so that there's less of a delay between the pusher going past that wall and then retracting, so there's less of a chance of enemies going past and triggering the rune anyways, or falling to their deaths without being hit. Because if they're not hit by the spell, they don't get considered as killed by a player, so they don't drop their loot, they don't drop their experience. Well, they don't drop their player kill loot at least. And yeah, I do have a second absorption hopper up there to take in all the dropped stuff as well as all of the experience drops. So yeah, pretty good. The only downside is, once again, I have to be nearby. So now that we've got all of that handled, let's kind of talk about what I've done to make all this stuff work out. I don't have any blaze spawners yet. What I realized though was with magma slimes is that they drop magma cream. And then you could throw them into this separator to get both slime and blaze dust. And then you can then throw that blaze dust into this building here, which I'm cutting off to show how I built it. And you use a bar press on it. And then you can throw 5 dust into the system and it'll press it into 1 rod. So that's how I'm getting blaze rods despite not having a blaze spawner right now. And yeah, building this was a tremendous pain in the ass. Mainly trying to get that piston pointing downwards. It doesn't work if you don't have it done like that. And yeah, this is all from immersive engineering. So once you build everything up like that, you right click with a hammer and it turns into that building. Next up, since I went down the rabbit hole of spells, I've decided to make a whole bunch of gear. To make the battle mages stuff, you put a piece of diamond gear onto an enchanting apparatus and then put 4 mage bloom fibers on each cardinal direction. And then you can upgrade this equipment. I've upgraded 3 of the 4, I just haven't upgraded this thing yet, just because I want to test something out before I upgraded it. Well, more to the point, because you can upgrade it to 3 tiers. So before I upgrade this to tier 2, I just want to test something before I start working on upgrading my other equipment, which is already at tier 2. So first I set up some enchanting stuff. And then if you've noticed all the various gears that will have a bunch of different prefixes and names on them, and they'll have different effects, that's from the apotheosis system here. And I made a little mistake here. I got confused on what I'm supposed to be doing. You don't drop gear down there. What you do is use the salvaging table, and you can then salvage rarity materials depending on the rarity of the item that you salvage. And then those are used to upgrade gems, which I'll show off here in a minute. But for gems you don't plan on using, you drop them on the floor and then drop an anvil on them, and they'll drop gem dust. Gem dust is used both for the reforging table as well as upgrading gems. To upgrade gems, you need 2 of a certain tier of gem, and then you'll need some of those rarity materials and then more gem dust. So make sure you break all that stuff down as much as you can. I believe there's like 5 or 6 tiers ending at perfect, where you'll need orange level of gems and rarity material stuff. Now, to be able to use your gems, you need to use the reforging table to get sockets on the gear. And as you can see, it's all kinds of different things. I think it works kind of the same as the enchanting table, where there's a fixed seed of what you can get. So if you don't like your options, you can just make like some gear you plan on throwing away and then enchant it to re-roll what you can get. But now that I've done all this, I'm going to upgrade the armor. Tier 2, all you need is 2 blaze rods. For Tier 3, I need to get into the end so I can get some chorus fruit, so worry about that another time. My concern was, will my enchantments as well as the apotheosis upgrades transfer between tiers? And they do. So that's nice. But we're not done quite yet with upgrading this stuff. The magic robes and whatnot can also be upgraded with threads. You put it on this table, and you can attach threads to it. Each gear has like tiers of slots, and there's like this thing where the weaker robes has higher tiers, so you can get better threads on them, because the threads scale depending on what slot they're in. So the very first thing I put on was the Drigamy thread, which increases your traveling speed by 20% per tier of the slot you put them in. So I put it in a slot 2, so I get 40% movement speed. So that's not bad. Also, threads don't stack, as far as I'm aware. Like, in a testing thing, I tried putting 2 Drigamies, or 2 Starbunkles, I mean, and that didn't work out, so one's all you got. And may as well start upgrading the rest of my gear. And look at that, 25% movement speed and 0.75 step height. And then, of course, I just made that one, I upgraded that one gem, which further increases movement speed. To apply the gems, you need to use a smithing table. So now, 25% movement speed plus another 37% movement speed. But we're not done yet. You may have noticed the Starbuncle over here. This is a ritual brazier, and if you right-click with a tablet of binding, you can now make a familiar item out of it, and we'll be able to summon familiars. Also, it's not too complicated to make the binding tablets here. So you go to the familiars tab here, click on it, and the Starbunkles will give you speed 2 for being summoned. And then something else I want to show off with the various creatures you can summon here in ours is you can dye them. There we go. Red Starbuncle, and I got a pair of shades. Starbunkles wearing shades don't do work. Oh god. This is my walk speed. No, I'm not fast forwarding this. Gotta go fast. But yeah, Starbunkles wearing shades don't do any work. And then, speaking of dyeing stuff, I may as well dye my clothes something from purple. I'll be Gandalf the Grey, I guess. Not that it matters too much. I don't play in third person. And when I do enchant the rest of my gear, it's all going to be glowing blue anyways. But next up in the magic equipment, there are focuses or focusi that you can create. And this also gives me a chance to show off how imbuing works, where you surround an imbuing chamber with some items, and then you put an item in the center. Thankfully, it doesn't actually use up the items on the pedestals, because to make things like fire essence, manipulation essences, you'll need things like water buckets, lava buckets, and those would be a pain to constantly replenish. So while that is crafting, it takes time, so yeah. I'm going to go ahead and make a tablet of mana regeneration, or an amulet. Now it's going to take some time for the focus to be built, so I'll go ahead and skip past that. Oh, by the way, I made an obsidian katana. Since I now have constant obsidian coming in, it won't be too much of a pain to fix it. I've also put a whole bunch of different upgrades on it, like a quartz tip, a leather binding and whatnot, which makes it stronger, swing faster, and all kinds of stuff. And then for the reforging table, oh, on hit I can get speed. And it also deals 5 damage to nearby enemies. Well, don't threaten me with a good time. So yeah, if I hit anyone, I'll just be even faster than I already am, and I'm pretty sure at this point I'm at over 100% movement speed. Wanted to check out if there's any useful gems to throw into the katana, and not really. But yeah, going back to the thunder focus that I'm currently having imbued, it decreases the cost for lightning spells or air spells, and it will increase the cost of other schools of magic spells. And I forgot to mention, but I put a thread of lightning in my cloak so it shocks enemies that I hit. And there is this building over here I want to take all of my gear for a test run at. So here we are. Sadly, I was hoping for a different building. The roof color looks the same as a infested temple, but this is not that. This is just a regular old abandoned temple. God, yeah, it's certainly gonna be fun trying to get used to moving around so quick. I got rid of my shield just because, well, there's no real point in me blocking anymore. I can just move out of the way. And as a perk, I can have my spellbook in my left hand, and I can then, have a sword for melee in my right hand, and then cast spells with my left hand. And I was gonna carve my own entrance, but let's do this in a more magical way. Yep, break spells, you put some pierce in it, some AoE, and it'll do that. Also, evokers. I hate these guys. I hate their blind effect. I also hate how they keep spawning, like, a bunch of mirror images. God, yeah, these guys are the worst. I guess it doesn't matter how well your equipment is if you aren't immune to blind. Let's ignore that guy and let's show off my discharge spell. So, much like Cold Snap or Flare, it'll affect nearby enemies, in this case, lightning. Sadly, it doesn't really work out too well against the illusionary evokers. But the reason I put the thunder thread on my armor is because, as far as I'm aware, unlike with Flare and Cold Snap, where Ignite and Freeze are tier 1 spells, you don't have an equivalent to inflict shocked on your enemies until tier 3. It's a tier 3 spell for like Thunder Shock or whatever it is. So the only way for me to be able to do my discharge stuff here is by having that thread equipped in my armor. And as for why I went with air, I really wanted to go with fire, but unfortunately enemies are immune. You know, enemies can be immune to fire damage, but as far as I know, there's nothing immune to lightning damage. Kind of a... Ooh, hey, Wither Rose is nice. It is kind of an interesting thing where it's like, defensively, fire magic would be the best because you've got blazes around that can fry you, and there's the risk of magma, which can be mitigated with fire defenses. But you don't want to use fire on the offense because an enemy might just spawn with fire resistance. As far as I'm aware, there's no cold or thunder resistance. Or some enemies might just be naturally immune to fire. But hey, pillager outpost nearby. Don't want to kill that guy because I want to go back to the villager place to get my to teleport back home. And there's an apotheosis boss just hanging out down here. That's strange. Thought there might have been a hole somewhere nearby, but there isn't. And yeah, this discharge stuff, absolutely brutal. I love it. But hell, why even bother fighting when I can just run past everyone and open their chests real quick? And as a bonus, I get this item here, which gives me extra hearts once I can find my belt slot. So now we're on the next tier of hearts. They are now yellow instead of orange. And oh, something I forgot to mention about my backpack upgrades. I threw it in an auto feeder, so that's why occasionally you'll just hear the eating sound effect. And neat, there's also one of those rogue dungeons nearby. It's kind of a hefty little chunk here. It's got the temple, the pillager outpost, and one of these. So let's just go on through here. Since I have the spawner set up back at base, I may as well go on through here and grab a whole bunch of the different spawners that are down here. Then I can just make a bunch of spawn eggs to change them. And a nice perk to being able to cast spells from the left hand is that I don't have to worry about being defenseless while I have my pick out. And yeah, destroying these spawners really takes a lot of durability too, good lord. Now if only I could find my toolbox. Now there are mining spells. I mean, I showed one off a little bit earlier, and you can even enhance your spells with Fortune and Silk Touch. But I don't know how those will work against spawners, so I'm sticking to the pickaxe for now. Yeah, this discharge spell is just so good. Look at this. Don't even have to worry about combat anymore. Then I thought, oh yeah, spawners. I should grab some specific ones. Looks like some pillagers are having issues with their boat. As an aside with these boats, if you ever need some blocks of quartz, you can just swipe some from the front of their boat. Also, there's a problem with Ultimine and the spell books where you can't use it if you have the spell book in either of your hands. Kind of annoying. Having some issues getting on up. This spell is not working like I would hope. Gotta conjure mage block spell and have it set to cast under my feet so I can make stepping stones. Yo ho, mateys. Surrender all your booty. And these two have some pretty sweet drops, especially enchanted gear or stuff that has the apotheosis upgrade, so always nice to break that stuff back on down at home. The typical downstairs to to the boat is covered in rocks, so we'll just do this. And this is what I came here for, Vindicator spawners. I also found another boat that had that and then used some eggs to change some spawners around. So now I got a whole bunch of Vindicator spawners down there and got them upgraded to spawn more dudes per spawn cycle. And oh yeah, they drop emeralds, so pretty sweet deal. So, hope you enjoyed seeing this crazy invention of mine. God, this thing looks so ugly though. I need to learn how to do some like pixel art stuff so I can make that tower look a little bit prettier. But see you all next time. Oh, actually, before I sign on off, let's go ahead and experience the portal ourselves, yeah? Ooh. Later.